Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Welcome back to For Strategy Gaming. It is Thursday, and you know what that means. It means it is some time for some team commentaries. Now, we're going to be starting things off here with a 2v2. Team number one over here on the left-hand side is going to be Inquisitor as our teal Terran player, and then his ally Pichu as the purple Protoss. Team number two on the right-hand side, we've got Chris as the red Terran player, and the blue Protoss is Anthony. So Chris and Anthony, Terran and Protoss versus Inquisitor and Pichu, Terran and Protoss. So it should be a pretty interesting matchup. One of the newer 2v2 maps with those Xel'Naga towers situated right in the middle. We've got an in-base expansion in this particular map as well. Also right behind all of the starter bases, there is a high yield expansion with destructible rocks to contend with, and then a normal kind of natural expansion right outside the typical front area. So there you go. Certainly a pretty interesting map, and hopefully going to be an interesting game here. So right now, Anthony moving out with his Probe Scout. Do keep in mind, as I've mentioned in the past, that these will be Masters level replays, so this is a Masters 2v2. And I guess before we get into the action, I will say once more, if you are a Masters level team player, 2v2, 3v3, or 4v4, and you would like your replays commentated, please go ahead and send them to me at forstrategygaming.com. So we've got Anthony moving up with his Probe Scout at the same time, Inquisitor moving across the map with that SCV Scout, and we also have Pichu moving down to the other position. They want to try to find out. Team number one looking to find out where their opponents are as soon as possible. Looks like Anthony did manage to scout Inquisitor immediately, and he's going to be moving right on into Pichu's base. Looks to be pretty standard play so far. Nothing too funny coming out from either of these players. Relatively standard openings. Now for Chris over here, he's looking pretty standard. However, right over here we can take a look at Anthony coming out with that very fast expansion, going straight into a Nexus before his gateway or anything else. So he will be relying entirely on Chris to defend him. And actually, did Inquisitor scout that out or not? No, he is not. He will be. He does have that SCV scout rallied over, so he should be heading on over there. We do have that Marine popping out, but it will not be out in time. So I'm expecting Inquisitor to move back. Certainly hope he does. He needs to get back there and actually scout out this expansion. And there we go. Finally, Inquisitor moving back with that SCV scout. He will be spotting the fact that Anthony has expanded. Something else to note about this map is, again, there is that expansion right inside of that main. But in addition to that, oh no, losing that SCV. You got to keep an eye here on these destructible rocks. It lead right into the main base. That's certainly something to think about. It's definitely something you need to keep an eye on at the very least. Do as Chris is doing here, and that's this building once completed will give him vision of these rocks so that they'll know when their opponents actually come up and push. So there you go. Back over here inside Inquisitor's base, we can see he's got that second refinery up. He's getting that saturated right now. In terms of what Pichu's doing, looks like he's getting robotics, starting out with that gateway, chrono boosting out that warp gate tech as well. Anthony's expansion is up right now, has got that Cybernetics core coming through, also starting out with the one Zealot. A little surprised that neither team is actually trying to maintain control of those Xel'Naga towers. We might be waiting until some of those initial units. Inquisitor kind of massing up those Marines right now. He's got that factory just about finished there as well. What do we have going on over here for Chris? Chris coming out with that double tech lab, so we'll be going mech heavy, relying also on this bunker's early game defense. I am very interested to see the fact that they actually decided to go off with this wall off. The reason I mention that is because without a Zerg opponent, this wall off is a risky thing. That's something you'll hear me say a lot in the 1v1 games. It's the same situation for these team games. If you don't have any Zerg opponents, walling off could be more detrimental than it does good, because if we see a push here from Inquisitor and Pichu, if we see them push out, they could easily take out these buildings, and Chris could be down 2 depots and a barracks, and that's definitely a big loss. Now take a look here at these factories. Looks like this one will be coming out with some tanks. We're also getting a tech lab here in the second one, and that siege tech coming on through, so he will be working up to tank heavy. Anthony finally making his way on up. He's got that robotics coming through, also chrono boosting out that warp gate research. Should be seeing another gateway or two. There we go, at least one more gateway. Wants to make sure that he does have enough early game units to actually help in case we see any pressure from the opponents. Now, taking a look over here, we can see Inquisitor and Pichu not pushing out quite as of yet. We do have actually a 4-gate robo. Wow, Pichu going very, very hard off of just one mining base. This is actually a bit much. So if they're pushing out and looking to do some early game aggression, this will still be effective. But typically 4 gateways in a robo is a little bit too much. You can't really afford that off of just one base. There's just basically not enough resources. So that's the idea behind it. But I'm assuming that they are looking to push out right now, or at least sometime soon. We do have 1-1-1 1 coming through here and actually getting that reactor already. On that starport, going to allow him to pump out double Vikings and or medevacs. It looks like we get a constant churning out of tanks as well as Marines. No upgrades for those Marines yet because there is not a tech lab on that Rax at the moment. We have a second Rax also coming out for Inquisitor. Back over here, let's see what Anthony and his buddy Chris are doing. We've got an engineering bay coming out for some upgrades as well as some turrets, most likely a reactor coming on through on that barracks. Now down over here, Anthony is on 3 gateways now. He's got a robotics base, so we'll be going right up into Colossus right now. We actually have Pichu destroying down these back rocks. I'm assuming this will be for some quicker reinforcements because they are looking to push. So yeah, Pichu and Inquisitor will be pushing across, and they want this to be open so that any reinforcements that would be streaming out for Inquisitor, instead of having to go down here and kind of wrap around, they'll be able to just cut right across through that main exit right there and go straight to the front. So here comes that big push right now. Pichu and Inquisitor moving across the map. We also got a proxy pylon coming out for Pichu, going to allow him to help reinforce, and they're actually going to be going for those back rocks right now, destroying those rocks and then heading on up. Now we do have Chris with a nice spread here of these tanks, trying to cover both those back rocks as well as that front. He's doing a decent job of that. Would like some tanks a little bit closer to the edge though, because they actually won't be able to deal with this push in the direction that it's coming at the moment. It's kind of an issue because yeah, it just, I don't know, if you put the tanks on the edge, you're able to shell out on any artillery or any units that try to run up onto those rocks, but that's not happening at this point. And here we go, a vision of the high ground from this Viking going to be shelling out on this expansion. At this moment, there's not a lot that Anthony can do. Does have this Colossus in play, so that could certainly help. We also get an observer spotting the back rocks over here for Pichu. Reinforcements coming on through. We have another siege tank, and this is going to be a problem right now. They're very well looking to lose this expansion. Anthony trying to take out the Viking, and he does. That's a problem. They're forcing a scan of the high ground, but right now, without that vision, we will need that observer to head on over, and there we go. Observing, moving across, maintaining vision of the high ground right now, and again, that's the problem with this quick expansion. You can see Inquisitor setting up this tank line. There's absolutely nothing they can do right now. They just don't have the forces to push against this. He's going to try with that Immortal, but with all of these tanks, that will get dropped pretty quickly. It looks like he might take out, oh my gosh, taking out 1 siege tank and a second. Immortal's going to town with that hardened shell while his shields are up, just going to town on those siege tanks, and that is unreal. He doesn't want to engage without hardened shield though. Still, he took out 3 siege tanks with a little help from those stalkers as well, but that was incredibly intense. Can't believe that one Immortal did that much damage. He's going to push forward with this one as well. We got that force field for him to work around, and they're actually going to be seeing some additional units, but there we go, losing another tank, and those Immortals, oh, look at that though, trapped from those force fields of the sentries in the low ground for Pichu. He's losing all of those stalkers there. He lost that expansion, so the damage was done. Even though Inquisitor lost quite a few tanks in that engagement from just those 2 Immortals and a few Stalkers, the fact that they took out this Expo, stopped all of that mining, is really going to set Anthony behind. I mean, you can see he's getting actually pretty close due to that pretty heavy saturation at this main base for him. He's getting pretty close to mining out in comparison to everyone else. We can take a look back over here. Still a decent amount of minerals for everyone else. Would like to see Pichu expand, and there we go. That expansion is up right now, so we will be getting that saturated. That was a big lead right there for them. Let's take a look in terms of resources lost. Yeah, we do have a heavy amount of resources lost here for our blue Protoss player Anthony, and in comparison, the only other person to really lose anything significant was Inquisitor, and that was mainly those tanks. I believe we lost a Viking and a few Marines as well, but overall, looks like team number 1, our teal and purple team, Terran and Protoss, are ahead, at least at this point in the game. Also getting some map control over here. We've got 1 observer spotting for that expansion. Still nothing doing over there for them. Would really like to see Chris and Anthony push out, and it looks like they are making a move right now. Not sure if this is just to move to that expansion or if they're actually looking to push and be aggressive. They did leave that rocks over there, and yeah, pretty interesting stuff. It looks like, though, we are going to see that push. Some Hellions moving forward to get a little bit of scouting information, spotting the position of the army. Needs to make sure that Inquisitor does siege up before that push comes and engages, and there we go. Siege tanks going up right now, and that's going to prevent Chris and Anthony from pushing up any further. We got another siege line coming out for Chris, though. It will be a little bit of a standoff, taking a bit of splash damage from those tanks, and what we need, of course, is air dominance. This 1 Viking not going to do it, though. Chris with those double Vikings giving him that extra vision, but look at that. The observer is going to be enough for that vision that is needed for those siege tanks. And beautiful, absolutely beautiful, catching out that last tank right there, shelling him out at the very edge of the line, and very, very cool stuff right now. So we get Anthony moving about right now. Looks like there was a little bit of chitter-chatter. I try not to read the chat box at all, by the way, when I'm casting. I just try to ignore it. So if there's something that's mentioned that I happen to not take note of and try to basically incorporate into my commentary, that's why I typically try to just ignore that stuff. Now we do have a couple medevacs moving across for Inquisitor, and he will be dropping. Pichu also moving over there with a few sentries that got warped in from that proxy pylon. Wonder where this drop's going. They're actually scouting for some possible expansions right now. So those Marines moving on over, and yes, they're going to be checking in this base just to see if there are any expos going down. At the same time, these double medevacs getting ready to drop. We can see Chris trying to get to that excess vision, but because of that observer, we do have these siege tanks able to shell out right there. And here comes a drop from Inquisitor in the main right now, and Anthony's taking the brunt of the assault from Inquisitor so far this game. Does he have a siege tech coming out? Actually, yes, Inquisitor just about finished with that siege research. I'm sorry, that stim pack research, and once he does, those Marines are going to be that much more effective. Again, still over here with the standoff between these two tank lines. Neither team looking to encroach right now. Really surprised, actually, that Chris hasn't realized, given the fact that he's taken siege damage, even with air dominance, that he hasn't realized that there's an observer there and he hasn't scanned. A simple scan will get rid of this, and then his problems will be solved. He'll be all set to go from that point forward. Now, we have a Twilight Council coming out over here for Pichu. He's also continuing to work up those Colossus numbers right now, trying to get a nice, strong count of that. We'll be probably incorporating some Blink Stalkers. Here we go, attempt to push right now. Coming out for Anthony and Chris, and this might have been a bad idea, walking right into the siege line, and look at how much damage they just took. Oh, there's going to be a big discrepancy here in terms of resources lost. Look at that. Anthony's army just got absolutely shredded. There we go. They drop, commencing back over here. Now that stim pack is up, going to allow them to take out these stalkers, no problem. However, with those cannons, more than enough to take out that drop. Unfortunately for Inquisitor, wasn't paying attention, lost those medevacs as well as all those Marines without being able to actually pull them back up. Again, continued forces pushing out across the middle. Now, we saw what happened the last time Chris and Anthony tried to actually engage the siege line, and hopefully they don't try that again. Basically, what you need to do at this point is take some small forces and drop harass, try to delay expansions, everything like that. I would actually really like to see Inquisitor and Pichu get some additional expansions right now. Looks like we are seeing Inquisitor move over here. Hopefully, Pichu takes this high-yield expansion or possibly moves over here as well. But we do need to see, especially when you've got a contain like this, even if it's just a semi-contain, do really need to see those players take advantage of that and get up an expansion. So again, what do you do in this position here if you are Anthony and Chris? The biggest thing is, as I suggested, try to do small harass with dropships and stuff. You can't just take your whole force and then just try to walk around. Like, they could technically break these rocks and try to walk around and move right in over here, but the problem is the second that they do that, we would just see Inquisitor and Pichu move right into their base, and since they are much closer to the main, they would likely win that base race. So there we go. Pretty interesting stuff, but again, pretty heavy tank line on neither team looking to break it right now. And again, we just really need Chris and Anthony to try to circumvent and do what they can. And we do have Inquisitor moving on up to this expansion over here. Looks like a couple zealots over here for Anthony breaking down these rocks, so getting ready to take another expansion. He has retaken this in-base expansion as well, has that nice and saturated. Not too worried about any tank lines like we saw in the early stage of the game. Proxy pylon still situated over here, but this is unbelievable. Just continuous reinforcements to the center of the map. Neither team looking to push out, and I really am a wee bit disappointed here in Chris and Anthony for not counter harassing. I mean, when you're caught up in the heat of the moment, sometimes you just don't think of those things, but you can't just sit here all game, because this is a problem. Because they are sitting here, they are getting out expanded right now. Here we've got Pichu over here, we've got an expansion over here for Inquisitor. Inquisitor may very well take this expo over here. Looks like that will be spotted by Anthony though, moving out with that scouting zealot. He does spot that expo, not going to be able to do too much damage though, simply because we do have this this planetary fortress coming on in right there. So that zealot's going to get taken care of very quickly. I've seen a little bit of micro here from Inquisitor moving around, and then there we go, no problem, taking out that zealot, and he is all set. So yes, this contain needs to be broke. It needs to, something needs to happen. You can't just walk right on it with Blink Stalkers. That's what you cannot do, because that's not going to happen at all. But you just need to circumvent, and I guess I just keep repeating myself. Obviously, unfortunately, these two players can't hear me and heed my advice. attempting with those Blink Stalkers to move up on those tanks, at least in this position, is not going to work because we can see right now Pichu and Inquisitor with that full contain. We got some DT moving in. This could do a bit of damage right now. We should be seeing a scan, and oh boy, a little force splash damage there because of that scan from those siege tanks. Thor trying to do something, but that was nothing doing. Looks like we did see Pichu lose a couple of his units as well. So another expansion and another one right now. So Inquisitor taking full advantage and doing exactly what you should do when you have a contain, and that is mass expand, get that economic advantage, and you pretty much win the game, no questions asked. So pretty heavy Viking count here for Inquisitor. Some bio in the mix. And oh my gosh, some more TT going to town over here and actually forcing the break of that siege line. Now is the time for Chris and Anthony to push. They're taking advantage of it. I cannot believe that DT harass actually worked. I really thought that Inquisitor and Pichu would have been prepared for that, but they broke the contain, as that is huge. It's going to give them a little bit of breathing room. They need to take advantage of that, though. Don't sit in that contained position. And yes, forcing them to push back right now. Very unfortunate situation there for Inquisitor and Pichu. I'm actually really surprised that Inquisitor didn't have any scans saved up to take care of that. I can't believe just a few DT were enough to push him back. And there we go, Anthony and Chris taking out the proxy pylons right now. So definitely sitting in a good spot. But the big discrepancy here, the big issue is that Inquisitor has that huge economic advantage. I want to take a look at that income. My gosh, look at that between these two teams, Team 1 versus Team 2. They're actually just going to walk right into that siege line, trying to take advantage of their massive army numbers. You can see right now, we got a supply cap for almost both of them, and this push is going to hurt right now. Walking into those tanks, certainly a little dangerous, taking a lot of splash damage right now. Chris and Anthony doing what they can to hold the line. We got Vikings trying to snipe out some of those Colossus, but just look at this, able to push right through without question. That is unreal. Just taking advantage of their economic advantage in this stage of the game because of that contain. They just completely roll through that army, and they're going to continue this push right on into this natural expansion, and then working right up into the main as well. And it looks like Inquisitor and Pichu did just win the game with that huge economic advantage, and the fact that they just mopped up. Pretty much they were both sitting at supply cap, I believe. At the very least, Pichu was at supply cap, and with these heavy Colossus numbers, able to shred through everything, the whole tank line that Chris had. And Chris trying to pull back with some SCVs, doesn't really matter. We got a couple of DT moving in the mix, but it looks like we must have an observer situated over here. There it is. So able to take care of that, no problem. And there you go, guys. Pichu and Inquisitor winning the game. So that's a pretty awesome tactic, and it's something that if you have a Terran ally in your team, especially in 2s, it's a little harder to pull off in 3s and 4s, just given the sheer amount of players in the game. But in 2s, if you've got a Terran ally, or if you're a Terran player yourself, on certain maps, if you can set up a tank contain, it'll allow you to do what we saw Inquisitor and Pichu do here, which was get that mass expansion, get that huge economic advantage, and then when you're supply capped, push out. Even if you get kind of mopped up in that situation during a push, you are able to quickly resupply without issue because you have that huge economic advantage over your opponents because they set in that contain. And as such, it's not a problem. You just re-up your army with that economic advantage and you win the game. Now, again, on the flip side for Chris and Anthony, what could they have done? The answer is, as I mentioned a few times, you don't circumvent the entire contain with your army because then you'll get pushed on. But if you can do drops or any type of harass, that's really all you need. And try to delay them from expanding and stop them from expanding. So, for example, if we saw Chris with a few medevacs hit these expansions up with some Stim Marines and Marauders before they became planetaries, it would have been much easier, obviously. But if he had done that, they wouldn't have been that far behind. They wouldn't have been at that disadvantage economically. And again, that's exactly what you need to do. Looks like they are dealing with some DT, and they're actually shredding through the army unbelievably because there is no cloak detection right here. That's pretty intense, and they're actually taking some pretty heavy losses to these DT. It's a pretty big DT number, but there's a scan finally. It doesn't really, he took so many losses from just a few DT. It doesn't really matter though. Obviously at this point the game is over, and there we go. Anthony leaves the game. So there you go, guys. That was the first team commentary for today. Again, on Thursdays we will be doing team commentaries, 2v2s, 3v3s, and heaven help me, but I do 4v4s as well, as exhausting as that is. Now, again, if you're a Masters Level 2s, 3s, or 4s player, and you would like your gameplay commentary, if you like your gameplay commentated on our channel, please go ahead and send those to me at force@forcestrategygaming.com. And every Thursday, I will be doing some team commentaries, and you just may get picked. Pretty interesting game. Hopefully, you guys did enjoy it. We'll be moving on to some more team commentaries for today. As always, guys, if you like the content, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Keep watching and keep owning.